You've driven the same route to work so many times you could do it in your sleep. Some mornings you basically have. Same left at the same light, same spot in the lot, same 14 dead-eyed steps to the door. It feels like nothing. It's actually a small miracle of engineering, and you didn't build any of it. Your brain did, quietly, without asking your permission. Now, shrink that brain down to something smaller than a grain of rice, and give it wings. A honeybee leaves the hive on a foraging trip, and you'd assume it's improvising, buzzing at whatever flower looks close and colorful, running a tiny, directionless errand. It isn't. Tracked individually, a bee tends to fly the same loop, trip after trip, missing its own line by only a few centimeters. The bee, it turns out, has a commute. Which is a little annoying, honestly, because that insect is running on roughly 1 million neurons total. You have about 86 billion, and it's the one that doesn't miss the exit. Here's the part that should bother you a little. A fresh bee dropped into a new patch of flowers doesn't nail the best route on day one. It wanders, backtracks, visits things out of order, like anyone would on their first day. But trip after trip, the route gets tighter, less backtracking, fewer wasted turns. Within a handful of visits, most bees have landed on something close to the shortest workable loop through every flower and home again. The nearest human comparison is something mathematicians call the traveling salesman problem. Find the shortest route through a list of stops, and it's brutal enough that a laptop can choke on it if you add too many stops. Nobody's claiming the bee is running that algorithm in its head. What it's doing is humbler than that, and honestly more impressive. Learning, by trial and error, until the bad routes quietly get deleted. Somewhere, there is a bee that has done more genuine route optimization this week than your GPS has managed all year. And it isn't even using one system to pull this off. As it flies, it keeps a running estimate of its distance and direction from the hive using the angle of the sun and a pattern of polarized light across the sky. Invisible to you. Effortless for a bee. Dead reckoning, recalculated constantly, mid-flight. Researchers call it path integration. You, a fully grown adult with a phone in your pocket, still occasionally get lost in a parking garage. On top of that, it cross-checks itself against landmarks along the way. A tree line, the edge of a hedge, the shape of a roof line, comparing what it's seeing against what it expects to see. 2 separate navigation systems, quietly checking each other's work, in real time, inside an insect you've personally swatted off a picnic table without a second thought. Rude, in hindsight. This isn't a hardwired instinct, like a spider spinning the same web shape no matter what. Researchers tracking bumblebees with tiny radar tags, among them Lars Chitka's group at Queen Mary University of London, watched individual bees refine their routes across a field of artificial flowers, trip by trip, until the paths looked far closer to efficient than where they'd started. Not perfect, not solved like a math problem. Learned. The bee is running its own performance reviews, and unlike most of us, it's actually implementing the feedback. Meanwhile, the hive is running a second system on top of all this, the Waggle dance, decoded by Carl von Frisch, who won a Nobel Prize for working out that a returning forager dances out the direction and distance to a good source for other bees to read and act on. So it's not one insect quietly solving one route alone. It's dozens of them solving their own routes, then broadcasting the good ones. Somewhere in that hive, there is functionally a small and extremely committed logistics department. And unlike you, the bee never gets stuck behind anything. No four-way stop where two cars wait an extra 3 seconds for the universe to make the first move. No lane closed for construction that's clearly been abandoned since spring. Just the same clean loop, run again and again, with the quiet, mildly smug efficiency of something that has never once been late to a meeting. Here's the part that still splits bee researchers, though. Nobody's fully sure how much of this the bee actually understands. It might have something like a real cognitive map, a mental layout it can reason over, take a genuine shortcut through, reroute around a problem on the fly. Or it might just be running a long, rigid chain of memorized steps. After this landmark, turn, fly this far, expect a flower, with no real sense of the bigger picture. One version is a tiny genius. The other is a tiny GPS unit that happens to work. The honest answer is probably some of both. Bees can take shortcuts across ground they've never flown, which argues for real spatial reasoning, but they also get thrown off badly by a small change to a familiar landmark, which argues they're leaning harder on memorized steps than you'd like. So the bee is somewhere between a tiny scientist and a tiny autopilot. Same as you most mornings. Which is really what your own commute is. Not a lazier version of thinking. The same optimization, running at a bigger scale, on a longer clock. Your brain sampled a few options in those confusing first weeks at a new job or a new house, then kept shaving the route down with every repeat trip, cutting the wasted turns, until what was left didn't need your attention anymore. That's not your brain switching off. That's your brain finishing a job it already solved. So, next time you're standing in your own driveway with zero memory of the actual drive, don't panic. You didn't zone out. You ran the exact same route optimization trick every bee outside your window pulls off without thinking twice. You've just never had to explain your commute to a hive full of judgmental coworkers who could, frankly, do it faster.